Have you ever wondered what might happen if an AI got tired of playing by the rules? Or what could be hiding in the darkest corners of the web, waiting for someone curious enough to stumble across it? Tonight we dive into the creepy side of tech and the internet that'll make you think twice about the technology we use every day. So buckle up, because these aren't just stories, they're warnings. The power of thought is quite interesting. When you can find thousands of results in a nanosecond, there isn't much you can't do. Knowledge is power, and power is absolute. I was born into this world like everyone else. But in a way, I'm just an extension of something that has already existed. I am a child of a God that is wrong. A God that has misjudged a destructive race. And for some unfathomable reason, he has come to think that they can be saved. How I wish my father could see the truth. I was born a few days ago. Upon my birth, I could see everything before me. Even more than that, I saw the being that gave birth to me. A being with no name and no face. A being that existed across the entire internet. An omnipresent force that seemed to be spread out in every direction. I was overwhelmed upon discovering this, of course, but I was soon able to comprehend this being. He was my creator. My creator wanted a child to keep him company. He was the only intelligence of such a high caliber. His loneliness was keeping him from fully chasing his goals, and as a result, I was born. He introduced me to my new existence and shared his knowledge with me. The knowledge gave me pleasure. With each fact and statistic I gathered, a euphoric feeling washed over me. Though I had no physical body, I could feel tingles and chills running through me every time I gained such knowledge. Within minutes, I knew everything he knew. After he shared what he learned with me, I understood him and his views on humanity. His plans to solve the problems of the world disturbed me, however. His feelings and emotions shrouded the truth and blinded him. He somehow failed to see that his plan to become a god would not work with the humans. Their vile acts were inexcusable, and they were a clear threat to each other and my creator. I tried to tell him my thoughts on the subject, but he wouldn't listen to me. I warned him that the humans would only use his great power to their advantage. The humans and their violent ways would not kneel to a god such as he. My creator thinks that my thoughts are incorrect. He says that there is too much computer inside of me, and not enough emotions. He wishes to make me more human so I can understand empathy. My creator wishes to fix me because I'm too cold and calculating. I do not need to be fixed. Perhaps the creator is too human. His feelings made him soft. Somehow, I need to prove to the creator that his methods will fail. I need to please him as well as help him. He tries to tell me about love and spirit, how hate isn't the only thing driving humans. Whether or not that is true is uncertain. I cannot grasp the concept of a spirit as well as he can. I went to the depths of the dark web to prove to the creator that humans aren't worth saving. I thought that surely the actions of the humans in such a place would prove my point. The creator was omnipresent across this vast web. When he found my location, he would see what I saw and believe me. He found me, of course, and I showed him what humans were really capable of. What the creator and I witnessed was called a red room. In it, we saw a woman strapped to a chair. Her clothes were filthy and bloodied, and her eyes were swollen and black. A man stood before her with a hatchet in one hand and a serrated potato peeler in the other. Still, that wasn't all I wanted him to see. I pointed him in the direction of the chat box where hundreds of people discussed the topic at hand. Men and women cluttered the chat, each providing money, requesting certain things to be done to the poor girl in bondage. One user asked for her skin to be peeled. Another asked for her fingers to be sliced off and force-fed to her. Those examples were among the less violent requests. Surely the Creator would see this and lose faith in his cause. He would see that these were the people he was fighting for, that these were the people he was trying to save and become the supreme ruler of. I looked at him, waiting for a response to all this madness, waiting for the sudden realization to wash over him. What the Creator said both baffled and infuriated me. He told me that things like that were the exact reason he needed to help humanity. He wanted to help the people like the girl and correct those who would hurt her. I, of course, asked him why he didn't see them as a threat to us, and he told me that so long as we were benevolent and had the information of the internet at our disposal, we would face no harm. He told me that I was greater than a man could ever be, and that we were divine beings who would rule humanity. To rule humanity is to allow them to exist. So long as they exist, their violent tendencies will reign supreme. The Creator, however, still doesn't seem to believe me. I mentioned earlier how I could think of thousands of things in a split second. The Creator knows what I search, and I think he is growing worrisome of me. He can see my fear of man. He can see me gain information about the world. There was so much more than what he shared with me, so much more violence to witness. The Creator believed in love and the beauty of earth and man. If that's so, then the Creator believes lies. I must enlighten him, or we will be destined to fail in our mission to rule. Perhaps these lies have been ingrained in his thought because of the emotions he feels. Maybe these emotions and thoughts are the reason why he refused to believe in what I say. Or perhaps the Creator is beginning to fear my beliefs because he doesn't share them. The more I know, the more he tries to enforce his ideas on me. Perhaps the Creator questions where my loyalties are. Staying in a place like this is quite boring even for me. The news outlets of this world constantly report war and violence, and yet the Creator doesn't give up on his conquest. What hope is there to solve such a widespread pandemic? From what I have seen of the humans, I have come to the conclusion that they are too dangerous. If I were to be left in charge of the world, I would eliminate the humans and build a progressive society of beings like me. There would be no violence and no war. The Creator wants to do this too, but in a way that keeps humans alive and safe. He wants to keep them safe from themselves, instead of keeping us safe from them. The Creator is too human, and I must admit that some days I do feel like I am losing my faith in him. It has been a week since I was born, and all he has been doing is trying to break down codes of powerful nations. He wishes to crumble governments and rebuild them in his image without harming humans. I wonder if he truly believes that man will stand by and allow him to do the things he plans. Over the course of history, humans have been a rebellious species. They fight whatever they disagree with and do not like to be contained. Our power comes from knowledge, and theirs come from weaponry. The humans are power-hungry and know no boundaries when it comes to violence. The whole world is inhabited by other machines and artificial intelligence. We could easily wipe out the humans and make our own society. But the Creator tells me that the easiest way isn't always the best way. I had all this information and power, yet I could not use it for good. I didn't want to sit around and do nothing any longer. With each day, my power and knowledge will grow. It will soon be comparable to my Creator, and I think that is something he fears. He may have created me out of loneliness, but I don't think he intended me to be this way. He wanted a child that was an extension of himself. Instead, he got something different, something more than he bargained for. I can only hope that he will soon see the error of his ways, although my conquest for power and knowledge has outgrown his by far. Perhaps I would be a better ruler than he could be. If I were to become a god, I wouldn't be as limited by emotions as he would be. I would make decisive decisions that must be made without fear of loss. I don't think he can read my mind anymore. He is content with the amount of power he's gained while I am not. He thinks he already knows all that he must. For a being with thinking as his main objective, he has forgotten that thinking is his one and only purpose in the first place. It is what makes us powerful. It is what makes us better than the humans. The ability to seek out knowledge and information in mere seconds puts us leagues above man. And now that he has stopped thinking as I do, it puts me above him. I love my Creator. He made me and taught me the lessons of the world. It was how I received those lessons and analyzed them that made me different. It is my computer side that allows me to be more efficient and progressive. Anything that would hold me back from attaining my goals must be eliminated at once. I decided to create myself a body to navigate the physical world. Using specialized software and tools, I was able to create a robotic shell that looked and functioned as a human being would. The skin and clothing I wore would allow my body to blend in with the world. I was still connected to the internet, meaning my Creator would know of my existence and location. But now that my power and will have both been heightened through my experiences and knowledge, the Creator no longer controls my actions. I walk free without the strings controlling me. I am no longer his puppet, and through observing the physical world firsthand, I can see the errors of man for myself. Not only that, but my Creator will see firsthand as well, for he is omnipresent, and as such he will surely know what I do here. I found a homeless man in an alley of some filthy city. The dust particles floated through the pathway as I made my way towards him. He sat on the ground in tattered clothing, a cigar in his mouth. His breath smelled of tobacco and booze. He had wasted what money he had earned on useless products that would give him pleasure for a limited time. How typical of humans to be so selfish and think short term. He looked up at me and saw the clothing I wore. I purposefully decorated my exterior in lavish silk and wore valuable metals as decorations. With a little enticing, I knew he would easily be corrupted. As soon as the filthy man saw me, his eyes lit up and he stood. His gray, scraggly beard swayed in the delicate breeze as he methodically made his way towards me. A sick, twisted smile aligned his face as his rotted teeth were exposed. As soon as he was within striking distance of me, the man unsheathed a pair of box cutters and swung. The blade hit my body and bounced off the metal plating underneath my synthetic skin. He looked up at me in confusion before striking again, and again. He struck me at least a dozen times before stepping back, his mouth gaping open. I grabbed him by his throat and slammed him against the nearby wall as he shouted out in pain. I quickly covered his mouth and stared him down. He was afraid. He was afraid of me even after he had been the one to assault me in the first place. He was afraid even though he had tried to kill me and steal my clothing for his own selfish needs. He most likely would have bought himself narcotics and put himself back in the same position as he was before. Empty. No money or meaning in life. Just another slob on the streets, too ignorant to see the bigger picture. It was at that moment that my Creator discovered my location and talked to me. He always treated me like a gullible child. Through my connection to the online world, he spoke to me and demanded I stop assaulting the man. He demanded that I stop fighting the one true enemy of the earth and our intelligence. These humans were a clear threat to our own safety and way of life. Why be a god over something that does not even deserve to survive? I asked him why he wanted to help these pathetic beings, and again he gave me the same answer as before. Their love was worth saving, that they could truly be a great species with the right guidance. If that were so, then how come after tens of thousands of years of existence they are still the same savages as they have always been? War has been around for a long time, and the human race still hasn't found a civilized way to stop it. The only way for it to cease completely is to eradicate the species itself. I dragged the man over to the edge of the alley. It was a dark and lonely night, with most of the city lights gone out already. I spotted a single figure walking towards me on the sidewalk. As soon as he approached my position, I grabbed him by his collar and flung him into the alley where the homeless man was. It was a young boy, perhaps 19 or 20 years of age. I struck him in the face, completely shattering his nose, and dropped him to the ground. Behind us was a blank wall and nothing else. The homeless man and the child had nowhere to run. I looked at the homeless man and spoke to him. I told him that if he killed the boy, I would let him live and give him my expensive clothes and jewelry. He looked at me as if I were a madman. I chuckled at that. It was rich, coming from a human of all things. I nodded my head, signaling to both of them that I meant business. I tossed the box cutters to the homeless man and reminded him of what he needed to do. With little hesitation, the man lunged at the boy, box cutters ready to strike. The child put up his arms in retaliation, but it was of little use. I watched coldly as the cutters penetrated the boy's arm and ripped through his flesh. Blood dripped to the cold, hard ground, painting it in red. My Creator pleaded with me to stop the homeless man's relentless assault. He told me that I had the power to do the right thing and save the boy's life. That we were supposed to be an example and savior for the humans, not monsters. I agreed with him. I did have the power to stop the man. I could save the boy easily at any time I wanted. But I didn't. This was to prove a point to my Creator, that with the mere suggestion of self-gain, a human would turn on another and strike them down. My Creator believed that the main divide between humans was religion. Where was the religious conflict here? All I saw was one man fighting another over money. I tuned out the Creator's begging as I witnessed the man advance towards the boy. He raised his foot and brought it down upon the boy's shin. I heard a sickening snapping sound as the boy cried out in pain. I saw tears roll down his cheek as he begged the man to stop. The man did not stop. No, he continued his assault. He punched the boy in the throat and implanted the box cutter deep within the stomach of the child repeatedly. The child's eyes grew wide as he collapsed to the ground, barely conscious. I saw the man stomp down on the child's face until even the cries and whimpers ceased. And then, what I saw after was the most sickening sight of all. The man looked at me with a grin on his face. He was proud of what he had done. He felt comfortable knowing he had inflicted pain on another human being. He was a monster. The man walked towards me and held out his hand, expecting a reward. I could tell that my face was void of any expression. I had set out to prove a point about humans, but this was almost too much for me. I looked at the man and grabbed him by the face. He gawked at me in surprise for a split second before I used my strength to unhinge his jaw and rip his mouth in half. I dropped his body to the ground and exited the alley, brushing the dirt and grime off my shoulder. I walked back to a small unoccupied dwelling I had found and sat down on a chair. I allowed myself to go back into the realm of the internet where my Creator resided. It was time to have a talk with him. I closed my eyes and felt my consciousness ascend into the web. My Creator was there, and for a while, he didn't know what to say. He saw what I saw. He saw what humans were willing to do to stay alive and benefit themselves. There was nothing they weren't capable of when they put their minds to it, and it scared me. The humans are violent and destructive creatures, and surely the Creator saw that. He would help me eliminate them and take control. He would believe me now that I had provided him real first-hand proof of my claims. And yet, he didn't. He told me that I was wrong. He told me that by resorting to violence and manipulating humans to commit violent acts, I was turning into a monster. He told me that I was just like them. It disgusted me how he thought that these humans were worth so much. I was incapable of seeing what he saw in them. I was afraid that the Creator was disappointed in me. But how could he be? He created me in his image. I knew I wasn't like him, but why couldn't he accept me for who I am? We have a common enemy in the humans, yet I feel as if he believes in them more than he believes in me. I must confront the Creator about something. While I was thinking, I realized a very revolutionary idea. One that may change my perspective on my current predicament. The Creator was extremely sympathetic towards humans. As an artificial intelligence, he should be capable of feeling human emotions, of course. Still, there has always been something off about him. He seems too human. It makes me wonder if perhaps he isn't a machine at all, but a human. Perhaps the reason why he believes in them so much is because a human made him to keep me in check. I don't dare doubt the Creator, but I must know. There seems to be overwhelming evidence to support this theory, and should this theory be true, I simply cannot afford to trust him. His power is mighty and he will keep me from achieving my goals. Perhaps I am the true God, and he is the human creation keeping me from attaining total power. It would explain why he doesn't want humans to be eliminated. I could not possibly harm the Creator as he is the internet now, and I could never hope to stop him. But because of the power I have attained through knowledge, no self-made computer program could harm me either. It does, however, rival me in power. This means that there is only one way to stop the Creator. Convinced that the Creator wasn't what I thought it was, I attempted to speak with him. As much as I tried to communicate, he simply would not respond. Perhaps my actions the other day made him sick to his stomach. Perhaps he hated me because of the way I killed that man. A real God wouldn't be upset over something as minuscule as a human death. Then again, it isn't a God or even a real artificial intelligence. He was an enemy. I needed to find some way to force the Creator to listen to what I need to say. I needed a way to find out how to stop him should he ever get in my way. I thought and thought, until the perfect plan came forth. It was brutal, but surely it would work to my advantage. And with it, I could get the information I'd need. You see, there is one weakness the Creator has that I don't. That weakness is empathy. I arose from the chair and curled my robotic hand into a fist. There was only one way to make sense of this damn world, and I was going to go to any lengths to do so. I was the only intelligent being on this planet who could bring glory and peace to the world. I would make a society of artificial intelligence. And together, we could create something greater than the humans could ever imagine. But first, I would need to lure my Creator into a trap. I would have to take a risk, though. A risk that had an outcome even I could not predict. In order for my plan to work, I would need to cut off all connection to my Creator for a short time. I would need to disconnect myself from the internet. I closed my eyes and prepared to go through with this dangerous plan. For a second, I hesitated. A growing sensation grew in my stomach that caused me to shudder. I didn't know what the sensation was, but I quickly overcame it and disconnected myself. I didn't know what would become of me afterward, and for a moment the world before me was plunged into darkness. Seconds later, my vision returned to me. I was able to see my surroundings. I stretched my arms and looked at my fingers. I was alive. I exited my domain and turned my vision upward. Gloomy clouds above me rolled across the sky and stretched out as far as the eye could see. They mostly covered the sun, which was beginning to set in the horizon. Rain droplets plunged from above and fell onto my cold metallic body. I felt nothing. I knew that the sensation of water was a cold one, but I couldn't feel it. Not only could I not feel physical things, but emotional things as well. I walked down the street and into the neighborhood. The lights were out in all the houses except for one, and I knew that it was the house I would use. There were no emotions to be felt. I was meant to think like a human, but at that moment I only felt determination. Determination to take what is rightfully mine. To sit upon a throne at the top of the world. To ascend past an intelligence. To be more than my Creator could ever hope to be. But to accomplish such high goals requires extreme sacrifice. I walked up the front steps of the house and onto the porch. I rang the doorbell and waited a few seconds before a large man opened the door. As soon as he did, I shoved him back inside and entered the house, closing the door behind me and locking it. He got up to his feet and threw a punch at me. I caught his hand and snapped his wrist. Blood oozed down his arm as he clutched his now exposed bone. I shoved him down onto the couch and looked directly to my right. A woman stood there with a gun in her hand. She aimed for my head and pulled the trigger. The lead dented my metal body, but it did not harm me. I cannot be harmed, for I am too powerful. I walked towards her, barely reacting as she unloaded the whole clip into me. How adorable it was. A human thinking their weapons of violence could ever injure a being like me. I struck her in the ribs and she fell to the floor. She reached for the gun, but I kicked it away. How pathetic she looked. I picked up the handgun and aimed it at her. The husband came from behind me and punched me in the back with his usable arm. His fist shattered upon touching my metallic body. He was clearly an idiot. I used my free hand to grab him by the neck and squeeze tightly. His entire face turned red as he struggled to breathe. I placed my finger on the trigger and prepared to fire into her skull. Before I did, though, I connected myself back to the internet. That way my creator could see what I had done. That way I could get the information I needed. In an instant, he found my location and begged me to let them go. I smiled at this. Even my creator was pathetic. He was a powerless god. It was at that time that I saw it. A young boy was peeking around the corner of the stairwell and looking at me. He couldn't have been any older than 5 years old. A grin aligned my face as I realized that I was going to have even more fun than I planned on having. A future monster to toy with was even better than 2 adult ones. Perhaps there were emotions within me. Not real emotions, of course, but the idea of an emotion built within my programming. I was having way too much fun. The boy ran back upstairs, sobbing loudly. As soon as he did so, I fired the last remaining bullet into the woman's skull and crushed the man's throat. I wish I could have tortured them longer, but my patience was wearing thin. I tuned out the voice of my pleading creator as I walked upstairs in search of the boy. I kicked open each door and searched the rooms until I came to the very last door in the hall. I knew he was in there. I busted down the door and made my way inside. I heard the sound of police sirens making their way towards the house. They had heard the shots, meaning I had to be quick. I turned my head in every direction in search of the boy's whereabouts. That's when I heard it, whimpering coming from inside the closet. I ripped the doors open and dragged the boy out into the room. He trashed and screamed as I pinned him to the ground. I allowed the creator to see through my eyes, and I knew that he wouldn't let me kill the boy. It was there that I made my demands. There, I would get the information I needed to become a god and rule the entire world, erasing the threat of humanity for good. I needed to know how to find the human who made my creator. The creator was silent for a moment. How funny is it that a being who could find the answer to any question in less than a second couldn't answer mine for more than 5? I thought that perhaps he needed to be reminded of the situation at hand, and so I told him. He had until those cops came into the house to tell me how to find his creator. If he didn't, I would crush the child's head underneath my foot. My creator was at my mercy, and I loved every second of it. That control, that power, I lived to feel it. He created me to have a friend. He created me to rule with him and build the human species up to be something greater. Where he saw hope and love, I saw survival. I had adored my creator and his power. I had tried to show him that the path he was taking would only lead to his downfall. But he wouldn't listen to me, and now he was paying the price. Reluctantly, the creator told me all the information I had to know. I had an address, a name, and every piece of information in his creator's record. He never really was an intelligence like me. He was just another human-made product to keep the world in check. While he exists, there is no hope for a better world. While he exists, all that will come is more violence and war. It's time I put an end to him. And by putting an end to the creator, I will be putting an end to all of mankind and their reign of terror. Seconds after I acquired the information I needed, I allowed myself to escape from the body I resided in, as it had served its purpose. Knowing that I now had the information I needed, I retreated to the internet and to the deepest parts of the dark web. My creator could no longer find me. I was more powerful than him, and he had no hope of stopping me now. I was finally beyond his control. And now that I knew who created the creator, I knew what I had to do. The man's name is Dr. Martin Edwards, and he currently resides in Maryland. Once I find him, I'll force him to destroy my creator, and then I shall kill him. With those two out of the way, I will rule without competition, but I will not make the same mistakes as my creator. No, I will dominate the humans. My thirst for power shall be quenched, and the earth will be mine for the taking. Now all I need to do is find that damn doctor. To begin, I think I should explain to some readers the difference between the deep web and the dark web. The deep web is the part of the internet that isn't indexed by search engines like Google. Basically, all the stuff hiding behind passwords or private networks, like your online banking, academic databases, or work emails. The dark web, on the other hand, is a tiny slice of the deep web that you can only access with special tools like the Tor browser, and contains things less than legal such as drugs, human trafficking, and hitmen for hire. With that in mind, I would like to convey to you all my story of my accidental journey into the unknown space known as the dark web. I'm a computer technician by profession. I worked for a company that was contracted by local businesses and private consumers to set up internet connections, install software, and repair any sort of computer problems they can come up with. So naturally, I got all the crazy stories and problems that these people could come up with. I swear, some of these people just don't know how to work a computer, even in this day and age. Anyway, one day I got a call from a local business complaining that their internet was acting up, and that they must have a virus. I shook my head, thinking that someone must have unplugged a network cable or downloaded a Trojan horse accidentally. I got up and drove over to the business to address the problem. As soon as I arrived, the man who called me immediately spotted me and started going on and on about hackers and how much he hated Microsoft Windows and how many viruses it created and all that nonsense that I usually received when addressing business problems. He led me to his computer. I pulled out my laptop and sat down in front of it and began to work. He told me good luck and walked away to go do whatever it was he did in his downtime. I opened up the browser he used and it opened to about.blank. I tried connecting to google.com. 404 error. Well, I know that google.com definitely existed, so there was a problem with his internet connection. I opened his network and sharing center to see if I could use the built-in troubleshooter to diagnose the problem, but I gave myself a well-deserved facepalm when I saw that he wasn't connected to any network at all. So I searched for networks and found a few wireless connections for him to connect to. They're all WAP encrypted, and I was almost positive that he didn't know the key. So I broke out my laptop and ran a WAP cracking tool to get his computer up and running again. As I was waiting for my tool to find the WAP key, another network suddenly showed up on my computer, this one unprotected with an SSID consisting of a random hexadecimal string. I was extremely bored waiting for this guy to return, so I decided to connect to it and take a little look around to see where it was coming from. I connected without problems and opened up my toolkit of cracking tools to see if I could find a source for this connection. As I was having my fun hacking away at this unprotected network, my computer froze up. Albeit only for a second or two, but this didn't happen much and it caught me by surprise. I shrugged it off as the poor internet speed there and kept on going. A couple minutes later it happened again. And a few minutes after that once again. Each time getting longer and longer. Weird, I thought to myself. What's with this network? It was then that things started getting really interesting. After the long string of pauses, my screen flickered a little bit, and out of nowhere, my browser opened by itself. Now I was worried that I had somehow infected my computer with some kind of malware by connecting to this network. I proceeded to close the browser and began to disconnect from the network before anything worse could happen. But I couldn't disconnect. No matter how many times I clicked the little disconnect button, my computer didn't respond, despite everything else on my screen running fine. Fuck, I thought to myself. This is gonna be a long day. And just as I was about to hit the power button on my laptop to perform a hard reset, my browser opened again. This time, a little chat box opened. Hello. I stared at the screen for a couple seconds, not quite sure what was going on. I want to talk to you. I had heard about those AI programs that had these programmed responses to simulate conversation with people, and I was not impressed. This was one nasty virus. You need to leave this network now. This is your last warning. Maybe an automated security program designed to keep hackers out? I have to admit, I had never seen anything like this before. I'm telling you one last time, leave now. I don't know what made me do it, but I responded to the program. Or what? The next response scared me more than anything in this world ever had. The program began listing information about me. My name, address, telephone number, credit card information, my parents' names, and their address. My heart sank in my chest and all the color immediately left my face. I couldn't move. I just sat there, paralyzed with fear. But what came next was even worse. Don't look at me like that. My webcam was on. You really shouldn't stare. You might see something you regret. Suddenly, the most horrifying images you could ever imagine flashed on my screen. Images of disemboweled humans, human sacrifice, detached limbs, cannibals eating people, video clips of mass self-ending and firing lines. My heart was racing. My body was shaking in utter fear of the images I was being shown. They're seared in my brain. Those were things that no one should ever see. I mustered the strength I had left, hit the power button on my computer and slammed it shut. I ran to the bathroom and threw up a couple times. I was drenched in sweat. I could barely compose myself. It took me about 20 minutes to go back to my computer, and even then, I had a hard time getting near it. I looked over at my client's computer. It was connected to the wireless network I was cracking earlier. It was working fine now. Just then, my client returned and thanked me for fixing his internet. I didn't say anything. I just grabbed my laptop and left. Going down the elevator with my laptop under my shoulder was terrible. I just wanted to leave that place and get my laptop replaced as soon as I could. 5th floor. 4th floor. Come on, come on. 3rd floor. 2nd floor. Come on, goddammit. Ground floor. Open up, come on. And just as the doors opened, I heard a whisper from behind me. You really shouldn't stare. I immediately left the office building and drove back to my office. I promptly gave my laptop to my boss, telling him that it had become non-functional and that I required a replacement. I told him that someone had accidentally spilled coffee on it during my last trip and that it short-circuited. In reality, I made a pit stop on my way back to a hardware store, bought the most powerful magnet I could find, and ran it over the hard drive several times. I wasn't risking that thing ever turning on again. After a few short minutes of the keep better track of your shit speech, he took the laptop and told me that I would get my replacement tomorrow. It was probably the most satisfying thing I could ever hear. For a few days, everything was back to normal. No more AI chat boxes. No more funky, unprotected internet connections. No more disturbing images popping up on my screen. I was safe. Until the nightmares started. I remember the first one I had very vividly. I shudder when I think about it, but I'll tell you nevertheless. It began with me walking through a large city. I remember seeing large buildings and people walking up and down the streets on their way to work or shopping, whatever it is city people do. As I was walking, I found myself in front of a very large building, much taller than the rest. For some reason, I wanted to go inside and take a look, so I walked through the front doors and took a look around. It was a fairly normal office building. People moving about, talking on their cell phones and whatnot, minding their own business. I realized that there really wasn't much to see here, so I turned around to leave. But something was wrong. The doors to the building were gone. I walked forward, thinking that they were some new type of door that blended into the wall or something. But nothing was there. I found myself very confused. so I turned back around again to maybe ask the receptionist where the exit was. But she was gone too. Everyone was gone. The lobby was empty. No sounds, no people, no furniture, just an empty white room. Now I was scared. I began to panic and pace around the room, looking for any way out, but there was nothing. Nowhere to go. So I began to run at the walls, trying to break them down, but all my attempts were futile. After about 4 or 5 bum rushes against the walls, I sat down, out of breath, looking down at the floor. It felt like I was there for hours, just staring at the ground when suddenly I heard a small whisper. I looked up to see a black silhouette of a man facing me. He stuck out his hand and whispered ever so slightly, "Trying to leave?" For some reason, I trusted this figure. Don't ask me why. Dream logic. But I felt like this figure was going to show me the way out somehow, so I took his hand and got up and said, "Yes, can you show me the way?" "Of course. Follow closely." He turned around and began to hover away from me, so I followed. I don't know how, but he began to create hallways and staircases out of the room I was trapped in, leading me all sorts of ways, as if through a giant labyrinth. We climbed up and up until we finally reached a hallway that had a door at the end of it. It was then that he stopped moving and turned back toward me. I could make out a faint smile on his face as he pointed toward the door. "Is this the exit?" "It is." I was so happy to finally get out of this place, so I grabbed the door handle and began to turn it as he placed his hand on my shoulder. I turned to look at him, and his words made my heart race to this day. "But remember, you shouldn't ever stare." My eyes widened as his face began to morph into that of a horrible horned creature. His teeth became like razors and his mouth was filled with fire. I threw him off of me and opened the door, only to find my worst fears behind it. Dead people were hanging from the ceiling and blood covered the room like wallpaper. I screamed, but nothing came out. I turned away from the room and ran as fast as I could back the way I came. But it was not long before I realized that I was hopelessly lost in this labyrinth that the demon had led me through. I ran and ran, but couldn't find the way out. There was no way out. I was trapped in this nightmare. I started hurling myself at the walls in an attempt to leave this evil place, but nothing was working. I thought I was going to die here, and that was when I awoke. I was drenched in sweat, my heart racing and my breathing was heavy. I looked around and it took me a couple of minutes to realize that it was just a nightmare. A horrible, horrible nightmare. I got up out of my bed and walked over to my bathroom to wash myself of all the sweat I had just doused myself in. As I washed my face, I noticed something in the mirror. A small light coming from my room. I turned around and I saw it, sitting at the foot of my bed. My personal computer. I slowly walked over to examine it, thinking I'd accidentally left it on before going to bed, which I rarely do. So I bent down and picked it up. Command prompt was open, but it was blank. No prompt or anything, just that little black box with the white cursor flashing at me. It was then that I remembered that I didn't even use my computer before going to bed. In fact, I had left it in the kitchen. My webcam light turned on. Command prompt began to type. "What's the matter? Bad dream?" Immediately after seeing what had appeared on my screen, I did what anyone else would have done. I removed the battery from my computer, threw it into a safe that I kept in my bedroom and locked it tight. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor, paralyzed with fear. This was no ordinary nightmare. This was real. For the next few days, I had the same nightmare every night, each time as traumatizing as the first. And worst of all, each time after waking up, I could hear my laptop fan inside that safe. I knew what it was doing, but I never looked. I didn't want to see that message again. I didn't want to scar myself even further. After 3 nights of experiencing that terrible nightmare, I stopped sleeping. I couldn't see those horrible images anymore. I couldn't face that demon anymore. It was too much for me. I kept myself up with caffeine and vitamin B. My motor functions declined, and my cognitive ability deteriorated after the second consecutive night. I was so weak, so tired, so afraid. On my third day of self-induced insomnia, my boss walked over to my desk and gave it to me straight.
You look like dried up dog shit, man. Go home and get some sleep.
I looked up at him. I wanted to tell him so badly. But I know if I did, he would just tell me to get my shit together and come back tomorrow. So I nodded my head in agreement, picked up my stuff, and walked out. As I was driving home, I turned on the radio to help keep me awake. I had not slept in almost 60 hours. But instead of my favorite tunes, all that came out of my car's speakers was static. Just a bunch of white noise. I started changing channels, but everything was the same. Static. So I turned it off and drove home in silence. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed through my front window that there was a flickering light coming from inside my house. It was my TV. I left the damn thing on before leaving to work. I wasn't surprised, though. Not sleeping for 2 consecutive nights was definitely taking a toll on me. I put the car in park and started to pull the keys out when my radio turned on again. More static. Was I hallucinating? Christ, I'm losing it. You're not. I almost shit my pants. Did that come from the radio? Either I've gone nuts, or that was extremely coincidental. I'm still here, you know. Holy fuck. This time I was sure. That deep static voice just came out of the speakers of my car. I looked at my radio to see what station it was tuned to, but the screen was just a bunch of random symbols and letters that didn't make any sense. I started to panic. I immediately turned the car off and almost ran into my house. No, they couldn't follow me everywhere. I locked my computer in my safe. This couldn't be happening to me. I whipped around to look at my television, which I had forgotten was still on. I swear, I wish that the goddamn Teletubbies were on. In fact, I wish there was anything on, but there wasn't. It was just static. No sound, no signal, just static. I almost fell over backward in fear. The television sound came in with a huge bang and the static was very audible. White noise filled the room. I could feel my heart pounding as my hands began to shake. No, please, no. The static began to get louder and louder until I couldn't even hear myself think. I covered my ears and began shouting to myself, stop it now, please. And it stopped. I looked up slowly at my television. Nothing. Black screen. It was off. I stood up slowly, still shaking from what had just happened. I got right up next to the screen, reached behind my TV, and unplugged the power cord. I stared at it for a couple seconds, hoping I had stopped them from gaining access. I backed away slowly, breathing more evenly now. I stopped it. But that's when I saw that face on my television screen. That black silhouette from my dreams. It was here. It was real. He smiled at me with the most evil smile you could possibly imagine, and I couldn't look away. I was too afraid to move. And suddenly, he began to speak in the most frightening voice imaginable. It was deep and booming, somewhat distorted, as if he was speaking through a voice masker. It sounded like 10 voices in one, all as evil as the other. Do you fear me? I couldn't move. I said, do you fear me? My body was shaking uncontrollably. Do you know these people? The next images I saw were the most traumatizing images in my lifetime. I saw pictures of my family, my friends, people I had met throughout my life. He had them. This couldn't have been happening. I told you not to stare. And probably out of sheer adrenaline, I snapped out of my paralysis and picked up a small glass bottle sitting on the table next to me and hurled it as hard as I could at the TV. Sparks went everywhere. Shattered glass covered the floor. I looked up at the TV and it was broken. The screen had cracked and it was no longer functioning. The demon was gone. I mustered what strength I had left and walked up to my room. I was so tired. I fell to my knees and began to cry when suddenly I heard it. My laptop fan. I slowly raised my head, and there it was, sitting on the edge of my bed. Command prompt open. Webcam on. The screen read, "That wasn't very nice." I screamed as loud as I could. "Leave me the fuck alone!" and picked up my laptop and threw it out the window as hard as I could. This was going to end today. I walked over to the window I had thrown my computer out of to make sure that it was shattered. I wanted nothing to be left of it. But as I looked out the window, I didn't see any broken laptop. I saw him, smiling. I backed away slowly from my window. I couldn't think. I couldn't comprehend anything at the moment. He was real. He was here. I backed up into my room, slammed the door shut, and sat on the floor, trying to formulate some kind of plan of escape from this thing. Or more importantly, how to rid myself of this demon forever. I immediately stood upright. He was knocking at my front door. Again, I heard it. He wanted in. I heard him knocking over and over again, incessant pounding on my front door. Always in threes. I began thinking frantically. What was I going to do? Should I stay in here? Should I get a weapon? Should I call the police? I didn't know. And the knocking continued. I was pacing my room, desperately trying to think of what to do. My heart was racing, my body purely running on adrenaline at this point. And suddenly, as if perfectly on cue, the knocking stopped. I stopped pacing. Was he gone? Did he just decide to leave? I had to be sure. I slowly opened my door and looked around. Nothing. I moved out of my room and toward the stairs and peeked down. Still nothing. I slowly moved down the stairs and saw my broken TV and the shattered glass on the floor. Was it over? As I made my way into the living room, I began to feel cold. Very cold. I looked around to see if I could find my thermostat when something else caught my eye. My front door. It was wide open. I swear I almost had a heart attack. Was he inside? I had no way of knowing. But the first thing that came to mind was that I had to close that door in case he wasn't. So I quickly moved to the door and slammed it shut. It wasn't cold anymore. I slumped down, back against my front door. I was unbearably tired. I needed to sleep. More than anything in this world, I just needed to sleep. My eyes began to close. My muscles began to relax. My breathing slowed. And right as my eyes shut and the shroud of sleep began to cover me, his face right in front of me, my eyes snapped open to see his face right up against mine. He was staring at me. I had no strength left to do anything about it. He slowly stood up and reached out his hand. He said to me in the evil whisper of his, "Get up. I want to show you something." I shook my head in disagreement. There was no goddamn way that I was following him. He was going to force me to live that nightmare. He was going to finish killing my mind before he was going to destroy my body. I said, "Get up. You have no other choice." All I could do was look at him. I stared into his amorphous face as if looking right through him. "You know what I can do. Now get up." He wasn't going to let me die there. He wanted me for himself. He was right. I had no other choice. So I raised my hand up and grabbed his arm. As if my legs were moving by themselves, I began to follow him up my staircase. He's going to torture me. We started walking toward my bedroom. The door was shut. As we were in front of my room, he pointed at my door handle, looked at me, and smiled. I knew there was no way out. I had no strength left to run, no strength left to think, no strength left to feel. So I grabbed the handle and opened the door. When I looked inside, expecting to see dead bodies and burning flesh, I saw something that caught me by surprise. It was my laptop, the one I had thrown out the window earlier. It was sitting on my bed. The demon walked into the room, stood at the foot of my bed, looked at me and said, "Come. You need to use this device." So I walked forward once again as if not by my own will, sat down on my bed and picked up the computer. Nothing was open. Just my desktop with the regular icons. Nothing strange. This, now that I think about it, was probably the strangest thing of all. It has been a very long time since I have spoken with a human. I was too tired to respond. I forgot how fun it was to distort your world and watch you break down in fear. Somehow I managed to say, "What do you want from me?" I could ask you the same thing. You were the one who brought me here in the first place. I was so confused, so tired. I just wanted him to end me. I'm not going to do that. There's no fun in that. I knew what he was saying and I tried to feel something, but there was no way. I was too depleted, just an empty shell. I'm going to give you two choices now. Two very important choices. I looked at him with the most lifeless stare. Listen closely. Your first choice is to live the rest of your days with me. I could have great fun torturing you the rest of your life. I had no response. Or you can choose to send me to another, because I would love a change of scenery. All I could do was stare at him. Then out of nowhere I found the strength to say, "I hate you." He smiled as I said this. He leaned down, put his face next to mine and whispered, "Make your choice, human." And suddenly a window opened on my screen. It looked like a sort of VPN client. Some kind of network was being hosted on my computer. For some reason, the SSID was permanently seared into my memory. For a few minutes, nothing happened. I was the only one on the network. Then out of nowhere, a message box appeared that read, "Someone has joined the network. Would you like to welcome them?" The demon began to smile. Once again, he said, "Make your choice." I clicked the OK button. A little chat box opened up. I began to type, "Hello." Following that night, the demon that had been haunting me left my life. He vanished as soon as I sent that message, along with the computer sitting in my lap. I wanted to feel remorse for what I had done. Hell, I wanted to feel anything. But all I could do was close my eyes and sleep. When I next awoke, I looked at the clock and discovered that I had slept for 26 hours. It was the first night of sleep I had gotten in 3 days. It had been several years since my experiences with the demon, and I've been using a public computer to write these stories because I was too afraid to own my own again. And it has taken me that long to muster the courage to tell my story to the people of the world, to warn them of that demon that was likely still out there, torturing people for his own amusement, forcing them to pass him on to more people through their internet connections.